Welcome to Lockbox, a podcast providing real estate professionals with action items for success. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I'm going to be your host. I'm the founder of two real estate marketing and tech companies, STEEZY.Digital and RealNurture.io. In this podcast, you'll learn from top 1% real estate and mortgage brokers the exact secrets to their success. Welcome to Lockbox.
Welcome to Lockbox. My name is Jeffrey Brogger, and I am here today with Alicia Reinhard. Alicia, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Jeffrey.
Absolutely. So why don't you tell our listeners who you are and where you're from?
Well, I am in Boise, Idaho. So I lived here since 1998. So moved to Idaho before it was cool, but definitely a hot spot for real estate these days. Things are booming here. And, real estate as a whole is kind of driving our recovery for our economy nationwide. So it's not just Idaho that things are happening. Real estate as a whole is on the map. And I'm fortunate enough to participate as a licensed real estate agent here in our state, and also vice president, a new disruptive startup solving wire fraud and migrating away from email when dealing with sensitive information and working through encryption.
Love it. We'll get into everything that you're doing today. I love the dual hats that you wear, the two hats, I should say, because, when you become an active member of an industry, like you become a real estate agent, you start to do the day-to-day, and then from actually doing the day-to-day work, you notice a need that you're either uniquely qualified for, or you join a company that's helping to solve that problem. I feel like it lends so much credibility to that purpose because it's problem driven, right? It's a problem centric mission that's solving something that is really needed. There are so many products and services out there that are solving a problem that doesn't need to be solved, So I think that it lends a lot of credibility to it. So we'll definitely dive into everything you're doing today. But my first question is, what got you into real estate in the beginning? What was your first powerful exposure to real estate?
So I have been working in this industry for a little over 20 years and started in the business working for a title and escrow company, Pioneer Title and Escrow. Here, it's a local privately held title and escrow company. And I worked for that company for 15 years in a number of capacities. So title, escrow, marketing, and tax-deferred exchanges. So tax-deferred exchanges are coast to coast. So that was my first insight into some of our problems that are just coast to coast, and communication is one of those spots when doing business in different states. There's nuance there. And, I left Pioneer Title after 15 years to work in a leadership role with Idaho's largest brokerage. They were 900 agents at the time of me joining them. So they were already Idaho's largest brokerage, Silvercreek Realty Group. And they're just a mom, pop, and son shop. They just so happen to be Idaho's largest. And in 5 years, I grew that company from 900 agents to 1,800 agents. So we doubled that company in 5 years, and I had a blast doing that. But that is where, putting processes in place and building out predictable systems and supporting entrepreneurs at a very high level is something that I enjoyed. But I also was excited to step out of leadership and apply my working knowledge and be on the front line. So I opened my doors to ConnectIdaho.com and started working with encryption right out of the gates. I lean into technology. I think technology are tools and resources that can help us level up the way that we're serving. And so my initial collaboration with TitlePipe was just more or less behind the scenes, beta testing some of the things and applying it to my own business. And fast forward a year, September last year, I came on as vice president of business development, and we're taking our show on the road and launching nationally. So we went to the National Association of Realtors in sunny San Diego in November. And that was our first launch nationally. And so we're working with brokers and title companies and abstracts all across the country on strengthening the awareness and conversation around wire fraud.
Awesome.
Yes.
So you started your real estate journey in escrow.
Correct.
And then that evolved into then being on the real estate transaction side, helping build the team. And that's an amazing success story that you mentioned. And then again, through that process, you kind of realize some needs, and it seems like technology was always there for you, and
Yes.
you leaned into technology early. You're an early adopter, and it seems like you have a pretty innovative personality. So that's awesome. And now, today, helping to bring awareness to a subject that isn't talked about a lot. I mean, you see the disclaimers under like a mortgage loan officer's email, this huge fine print disclaimer about wire fraud and this and that, but it's still being sent via email, right?
You're exactly right. You can't remove the risk from real estate. You can't remove it, but we can minimize it.
Right. So yeah, that's definitely interesting. And anything to me that reduces things that can get lost in email and ignored for weeks, or things that, they just might delay the process. Anything that can help increase security and speed up the process using technology, I'm a huge fan of.
Me too.
So I think
technology is one of those things. It's a moving target. It's forever evolving. So I think staying up to speed on tools and resources that make sense for your business and seeking those out, I think are important for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So nowadays, you mentioned that you're wearing these two hats. Would you say that your split is like 50-50 between, is it Title Pipe? Is that what it's called?
Title Pipe, yeah. So titlepipe.com, it's where a cloud-based application that is, there's nothing to download. There's no one that needs to subsidize the cost. There's no entity that needs to, a broker doesn't need to buy the platform for the brokerage to use it. It's just pay as you go, the cost of doing business as business is done. And we believe in encryption for all. So residential, commercial, or refinance, there's no charge to using Title Pipe to the industry professional. So no charge to the real estate agent, to the title company, or the lender. There's simply a $50 charge to the buyer and seller upon a successful close of escrow. So if it doesn't close, there's no fee. Upon a successful closing, the consumer then has 7 years to access closing documents after closing, which is really helpful come tax time. And, just sometimes that you misplace that thumb drive or the hard copies. And, still sometimes people like those tangibles. This is a big deal. So having something that they can hold to show the transaction is complete feels good. But I think also having that transaction safeguarded and in the cloud, I call it a locker. Each transaction gets a locker, and this is applicable coast to coast. So regardless of what state you're working in, if you're working with an abstract attorney or title and escrow company, Title Pipe is that single neutral solution that works everywhere. So, as a business owner, getting out of random and into predictability is very important. And so we have a number of our title and escrow companies and lenders that are working through best practices. You mentioned kind of the disclaimers on emails and some of those more manual ways of just communicating and slowing the process down. But some are actually supplying platforms to access information securely. But where it leaves out is our consumer, right? So you may have a platform that you're using at your office for compliance, and you're through encryption, you're able to open escrow, but that still leaves out the consumer. So Title Pipe is the differentiator is that we're all inclusive. So all parties are represented, and that's kind of what sets us apart.
Sure. So then the other fraction of your time, are you still in production? You still selling homes? You still leading a team?
Yes. So both. So working with partnerships in this business are important. So I've got a partnership with Jennifer Myers, my partner in crime, and we work residential and a handful of commercial transactions, land. Idaho is expanding rapidly. So our farmland is now being developed. Rezoning is happening, annexing in from county land into city, and then going through developments. And, aiding in that entitlement process is kind of the goal. Yeah.
In that area, I mean, is Boise pretty pro-growth? And you can actually get things through entitlement within a couple of months, or is it like a couple of years, like, LA, where it's impossible to get things through?
Well, I would say it's not taking years to necessarily push something through, but each city has its own guidelines. So when you're working with, one area, it may differ from another where, so those meetings, it's the nuance of just knowing the planning and zoning and the process set forward to be annexed in. It varies from city to city. So some are easier to work with than others, but as a whole, it's definitely, months to a year, but not years.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, that's encouraging from a real estate investment standpoint, because when you're looking at taking raw land or farmland and rezoning it for R1 or R2 use, in some places can take months. And then when you're looking at your carrying costs for the investment and everything that goes into it, that can make sense. But if things get caught up at the city, you can't get stuff permitted and can't get stuff through and you can't get it zoned, and then the builder can't build. And it makes the deal so unattractive from an investment standpoint. So that's good to hear that.
Well, we're in the business of politics in real estate, right? So politics definitely come into play.
For sure.
And so I think that network of just knowing who's who definitely tips to your advantage when navigating those processes.
Yeah, absolutely. Which then hence the value of a local real estate expert, as opposed to working with an iBuyer company that has no real local track record or knowledge of the market. They're just this national billion-dollar corporation, right? If you have someone there locally, like yourself, that's been in the market for, a decade or more, has been practicing real estate, has tons of connections to contractors, builders, city workers, and is involved in the politics, is going to the city council meetings and things like that. Like, that's who you want representing you in either a real estate transaction for a buyer or seller, or a real estate transaction when it comes to an investment. So,
I agree. It's a very hands-on process. So you got to kind of get into the trenches. So
yeah, absolutely. So nowadays, if you're okay sharing, I'm curious, kind of what kind of transaction volume your team's doing nowadays, and then I have some follow-up questions which might help some listeners who they are close to that and they aspire to kind of break through that next level.
Yeah, I would say a bulk of my transactions. So I do probably 20 to 25 transactions a year through residential, and then just a handful of those commercial land transactions and kind of going through that. So that's kind of keeps me busy, but looking to scale. So it's just myself and Jennifer now. And then I've got through Connect Idaho, some partnerships around the state for some of our, Sun Valley, McCall, some of our vacation resort towns that surround us. I've got partnerships in those areas, but we aren't necessarily exclusively on a team. We're just, it's those relationships. So I like to stay in my own lane. So when somebody's looking in an area that is not my area of expertise, I like being able to defer to that. And I am looking at potentially expanding that, just because having the ability to network some markets, some new subdivisions are going to help with lead generation online and all of those good things. The best way to get new business is through existing business. And so just really leveraging the business that's in front of us and expanding that reach that way is, again, a forever moving target. And but I'm a big believer in growing slowly and doing it right and getting the right people on the bus, because they all are an extension of my service, my business. And so making that choice to get the right people there, it's the utmost importance.
Yep, that makes sense. So you mentioned you partner with Jennifer.
Yep.
And there's a lot that goes into a real estate transaction. So it usually makes sense to partner with someone that complements your skill set. So if you're more of the marketing agent, the lead generator, you can have someone that's more of the hands-on operator and like the listing style agent. And then you also need someone for like TC or admin on the back end, because that stuff has to get done. It's super important, but it doesn't resonate with certain personalities.
Right.
So I'm curious how you structured your two-person team to be highly efficient. And as you mentioned, your time's not 100% real estate. So you're doing 20, 25 transactions and then spending a lot of time as well on title pipe. So you have to probably run a pretty tight ship between your two-person team partnership.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how you thought about divvying that up, and then how you clearly communicate those responsibilities so that everything gets done.
Yeah, well, I like time blocking and I like setting minimums for a day versus maximums with things. So I think sometimes we can be aggressive with our goal setting, which is great. But I think the day to day, what works for me is setting those minimums. So rain or shine, in sickness and in health, there's a minimum of things that are getting done every single day. So working in your business and on your business. Having a transaction coordinator, I think, is something that comes with the evolution of a business. So if someone's just getting started out, I wouldn't recommend to necessarily leverage to a transaction service because you're not sure of the pieces that you enjoy or don't enjoy yet. So I really think having that when you're getting started in real estate, just doing all of the pieces yourself, I think help you identify your strengths and your weaknesses and where those services may be able to come in handy and really complement your style of doing business. And so I have a go-to transaction coordinator that is a licensed real estate agent, but they dot the I's, they cross the T's, and they're making sure that everything is moving forward and there's an extra set of eyes on things. Details are important in real estate and they're everything. So I think slowing down and time blocking to give the attention needed to each aspect of your business is important, but I think it varies from person to person on what that successful day might look for. So, for me, I start early and I end late. So I probably work maybe a little bit more than the average bear, but I always say I can sleep when I'm dead. So I like a busy, full schedule. And my slogan is serving is my niche. So I believe that, yes, I'm working in a capacity of selling homes or helping people with aid in that process. But at the end of the day, I'm there to manage the success of the transaction and I'm there to serve. And so really just understanding the needs of the client or the other agent. I believe the cooperating agent on the other side is also my client. So going through to make it really easy when you're dealing with a piece of development land, not all real estate agents may be as savvy talking about that. So I try and give as much information as I can, with, making those calls to the city, helping take out some of the guesswork of where that water and sewer is. What do those offsite costs look like? I try and really have a good scope of that and then articulate that to give somebody that may have a client that they're working with that it has interest in there. And I try and help move it forward and serve the agent on the other side by giving them what they need to do a good job. So I think it's everybody kind of has a different scope on what makes them tick, but that's a pretty broad stroke of how I approach things. So it's serving the agent, the client, and my team. There's a few different ways to look at that.
Cool. I like it. So there seems to be a trend of success throughout your career with escrow, real estate, and now title pipe. And I'm curious, what's like the single most important action item for success that you take on a daily basis? Is there any one thing that you just really attribute a lot of success to?
Showing up. I think showing up is like the biggest piece of the pie. What I've found in, throughout my professional career, when I show up, everything works. So I think just setting yourself up for success, whether that's in a home office during a pandemic, setting up a space where you feel energized and can move around and, have an environment that, is uplifting, I think is really important. But again, that kind of evolves. So I think setting yourself up for success is a must.
I love that. And a lot of personal development speakers have talked about how showing up is like 90% of it. Even if relating to something as simple as like the gym, it's so mentally easy to just be like, I don't feel like going today. But if you just follow one foot after the other and you put your running shoes on, you put your gym clothes on, and you go to the gym, you walk in, then you start moving, you feel a little bit different physically, and all of a sudden now you're kind of your mindset and everything has shifted a little bit. You see other people working out, you move a couple weights, you get your breath going, and all of a sudden now I'm glad I'm here, and now I'm going to work on this 1, 2, 3 things. And then when you leave, you're always glad you went. Right. There's never a time where every single time, right? You're always glad you went. It's just that little bit of like mental, got to get over the inertia of being still at that time.
Well, you got to Jedi mind trick yourself sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Because you're right. We want to talk ourselves out of it, but they say the heaviest weight at the gym is the front door. So showing up and like getting there is, you're right. Once you're there, you're going to feel good about it. You're going to get engaged. It's going to put a smile on your face to sweat afterwards, but showing up is 101.
And it's the same thing with call reluctance. You look at this list of leads and it's so easy to get overwhelmed and, oh, what's in the fridge? And this is a good time to clean out, my closet and go do all these other things that don't produce income and that you shouldn't be doing.
Right.
But if you just pick up the phone and you just dial.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. But if you just pick up your phone and you dial the first number of the first phone call that you need to make, and then you just do one number after the other and hit send, now you've made your first phone call. And it creates that momentum of once that first one's done, oh my gosh, it's like all of a sudden you have this momentum and you could sit there and make 100 calls and now you're in the zone. You're like in it. You're doing that activity during that time. So I think showing up is key. And I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yes.
So I'm curious, where you think the industry is heading. No one has a crystal ball, but you are on the cutting edge and helping with this wire fraud problem that's happening. And you're also helping to more securely and more quickly complete transactions and not let escrows fall out through human error and things like this. So that's going to be a huge piece of the puzzle moving forward, no doubt. But I'm sure that you just by being a part of a technology and a company in today's real estate space, you probably have some insights or some opinions on kind of where things are heading. So I'm just curious, do you think that the real estate transaction will be mostly automated by like 2030? What is your prediction?
Well, I was going to say, definitely don't have a crystal ball, but I do recognize that if we don't self-regulate, regulation will be provided. And if you look at the lending industry, they can speak to that firsthand, how overnight the lending policies changed. I think real estate's going to be subject to that. And email is cybersecurity, I think is, if you look on trending technologies, it's number 2 on the list for NAR is cybersecurity. So I know it's an emerging technology. We're kind of first to the table pushing this conversation, but what we're finding is, brokers around the country are struggling with the dialogue outside of the basics of putting disclaimers on their email address and asking people to slow down and verify. And so I think that there's really a space that this is a $4 billion a year problem, wire fraud is, and growing. They say in the next 10 years that they anticipate that number going to 50 million, which I think is just a staggering number, right? To be a $4 million a year problem to a $50 million a year problem. So I mean, just really big, that's a big jump. And so that just puts pressure on our industry to do better, to have that conversation. And so, part of me showing up in Title Pipe right now is helping with that narrative. So the way that I've been using it in my business this past year has given us clues that we can put together great templates to help agents that maybe are interested in working with encryption, but they're, when you've got that transaction, time is of the essence, figuring out the narrative and the dialogue to say, okay, how do I get the other cooperating agent involved with this? We don't want you to stall out a transaction or come up with what I would say excuses to continue to perform down a way that is antiquated using email. I think slowing down and having those narratives are really important. And so, I would just say, although I don't have a crystal ball, I know that the need is going to continue to grow. And if we don't regulate, it's going to be provided for us.
True that. I mean, the pendulum swings the other way really hard when you don't self-regulate and keep things in check.
Right.
So yeah, it makes sense to just stay ahead of it and address this issue now.
Yeah, but because I don't see real estate agents, the human element of business, I think is so necessary. It's a very complicated process. And NAR did a study on millennials, making this assumption that, this next big move up buyer is going to enjoy online, all things online. So working through online platforms and not a human being. And when they took the poll for the millennials, it was contrary to what they had initially slated. Millennials, yes, they are educated. They have been possibly living in their parents' home for some time, saving up money and doing their research. And but when it comes down to it, yes, they want to do their homework online, but when it comes down to it, they then want a human to help them navigate it and personalize the experience through it. Something that an online portal can't perform, can't fulfill that need. And so I think it's just tuning out some of the threats that have always come in to threaten our industry as real estate agents. That, there's this other thing that's going to make us obsolete. And I just don't believe it. I think the human element to this business is so vital, and humans crave that personal connection. And when you're making an investment in real estate or purchasing your first home, I think having that connection is irreplaceable.
Powerful. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, technology will, I think, continue to emerge into certain parts of the transaction, because there are so many parts of the transaction. And hopefully it helps to provide higher security, create a faster transaction, and eliminate a lot of the paperwork that is involved with real estate, add clarity in title, so that there's not like this random cloud on the title that holds up this transaction, you didn't even know it, and this and that. Like, hopefully technology will help to normalize a lot of the data out there for real estate and solve a lot of those problems. But when it comes down to it, that human to human understanding of another person's needs, and then helping them with their best interests in mind and a fiduciary responsibility to them, using their understanding of real estate and negotiation to go to bat for them, I don't see that going away anytime soon.
I agree. And I always say, I have a little slogan too that says, I provide, you decide. So there's sometimes more than one way to approach or problem solve. And I think giving all of the paths and educating on the options is people love it. People love making informed decisions. And there's a lot of noise even online. So even just being able to take some of those Q&As from them doing their research and being able to give the nuance there and read between the lines and apply practical application to their scenario, because knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. It's not powerful just knowing something. You have to know how to apply it and utilize it. And I think, through the power of communication and understanding needs, I provide, you decide is just empowering them to do what's best for them. Because I always say, whether you're the buyer or the seller, it only has to work for you. So it's, and that's it. We only have to look through that lens.
Yeah. No, I like that. I provide, you decide.
Yep.
So you mentioned online lead generation a little earlier, and that's one of the most popular topics that real estate agents are interested in, because it is such an important aspect nowadays when most buyers and sellers begin their journey online. And if you want to really compete with those iBuyers, they're doing what's called fishing upstream, which is where they're capturing at least the contact information or at minimum the attention of a buyer or a seller early in their journey, not only when they're like 30 days out. Right. So I'm curious what you're doing nowadays for online lead generation in Boise for both residential and then also for the land. How are you getting buyers to, raise their hands and become a part of your CRM process and follow up? And also, probably more importantly for my listeners, they always want to know how you're getting the sellers.
Right. Yes. Yes. Well, I think the best way to get new business is through existing business. So I think that's where the marketing, it's this win-win that comes up, because when you're marketing a listing, it's important to the seller, right? That you're putting the home in the best light and that there's all hands on deck and you're really maximizing their exposure. And it becomes win-win just because as we're doing that, having predictive analytics on your website, I'm sure you're utilizing predictive analytics in your website, but I think that's a misstep to not have predictive analytics. I know I have a great sphere of influence that I take care of but I also have this outer tier that I don't personally have a working relationship with them. They're seeing me through, the presence online, the marketing efforts for pushing and marketing properties out. But ultimately, when they're clicking on it, getting information or driving them back to the website where we can capture the information there, it's having predictive analytics and having some internal logic with your website to help incubate some of those things. I think it's a no-brainer. So I think having a website is important. It's your professional promise online that you're going to do a good job. But I think predictive analytics helps level up some of that lead capture that's happening online for people that you don't know. And I would say that has been very helpful in my business. And I think it's using predictive analytics to boost posts, just even, take your MLS listing and doing a strategic boost out there, typically for, a 3-day boost through KV Core is the platform that I'm using right now. It's, for $60, that can typically generate about 12 leads online. So it's a boost push for like an open house or something prior to on a new listing, and, having 12 additional at-bats to serve. Again, it's knowing to say the right things at the right time. And I would encourage people, if they're new, looking for ways to lead generate, this is where sometimes teams become a no-brainer to be a part of a group where you have the ability to get in the front of business that's going to happen anyway. But there's a number of ways to good old-fashioned networking. It's good to be seen. Get out there. Like I said, I focus on other real estate agents. I'm part of Women's Council. I was our state president for a number of years. I'm our 2022 chair of RPAC, our Realtor Political Action Committee for our association. And I do that because protecting private property rights, they're important to me. It's important that I'm working for you long after a close of escrow on a property. And protecting those rights are something that I hold a very high value to. So, some people would look through the lens going, gosh, you spend a lot of time volunteering. And again, time blocking is very important, right? To accommodate all of the pieces that we need to, that speak to me in my business. They're non-negotiables for me. I'm not going to participate. It's important. It's part of my business. And so, talking about RPAC and why I invest and why that's important is, it means maybe nothing to somebody that just sees RPAC on my email. But when I can explain to a client the power behind why I invest and how this is going to affect their bottom line and their private property rights, it puts another level to it. So being the expert is important, and being confident in your space. It's okay to say you don't know. If you don't know something, it's okay to say, let me fact check that. There's a few variables in my approach, but I think being an expert in your field and showing people the way, they're expecting that. And so leading with the information that can help solidify the relationship, build rapport quickly. Trust is important. People like to do business with people that they know, like, and trust. And if you're finding somebody online that they don't know you, building trust is really important. So shining online and having those things in place can help do that.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. And you touched on a couple of really important tactics that are used from a digital marketing standpoint. I own a digital marketing agency for real estate, and the best way to generate buyer leads is through listings, right? Is through
hands down.
Right. And so if you already have a listing, use that listing to then generate more leads. And so you mentioned, you can get buyer leads for like $5 on Facebook and Instagram. And that's like a national average. Actually, some markets are less, but other markets are more. And so it's a really interesting tactic to be able to, number one, show your seller and future listing appointments the type of exposure that you get. Because you can get thousands and thousands of impressions for that $60 like you mentioned.
Yep.
But also now you have 12 more at-bats that's listing specific, and it's a feature listing for you. And you're bringing the buyer if one of those comes through. So that's just a win-win, no-brainer, and totally, is in line with our strategies at my agency. And then you also mentioned like the offline stuff. I love that. Never forget just your sphere, the people around you, walking into a restaurant. One of my top clients, he's famous for following to a T the Brian Buffini approach. I mean, even a server walks up and he says, do you have a real estate agent that you would use to refer business to? And they say, no one's asked me that. And you say, oh, okay, well, here I am, I'm X, Y, and Z. Here's my business card.
Yep.
Would you use to refer me if you ever were to buy or sell a house? And they're like, yeah, sure. Does that all the time to everybody. He does that for 25 years. Now he's like the go-to guy in his market, and everyone knows him, right? It's so simple.
So
there's
simple. Well, some of those,
a lot of ways to do it.
There's so many grand things in simplicity though, right? I have a lot of people that'll ask me, just from my role at Silvercreek in leadership and helping businesses evolve, what CRM should I be using? What's the best one that you recommend? And I was like, honestly, the one that you will use is the best one. So don't overthink it. Don't overthink your tools and resources. I think some of the fundamentals are just showing up, making the calls, getting in front of business that's going to happen anyway, and maximizing the resources that we have that perhaps our broker's already providing for us. So I always suggest starting there and then maybe filling in the gaps, but don't overthink it. There's going to always be an evolution of your business. And I don't think monkeying around and beta testing 12 different CRMs is a good use of anybody's time personally. I think pick one and use that and keep it simple, folks.
There you go. I love it. So is there a question that I should have asked you or anything that you'd like to expand upon from earlier?
Oh, gosh. Well, I feel like nothing's coming to mind that we haven't talked about. I would like to send you some additional information that might be helpful. If someone wanted to reach out to me, I'd love to, make my contact information available, but I'd also like to provide some of the industry specific pages that we've created for a real estate agent, for a broker, for a title and escrow company, for a lender. So should any of your listeners like to engage, we'd like to speak directly to them and craft the narratives that they need and the tools and resources to inspire utilizing encryption in their business and understanding it and not recognizing it's not hard, it's just new, right? So this is just new. And sometimes we are old dogs and don't like learning new tricks. And this is one of those things that I'm just going to suggest that lean into technology. Don't be afraid of it and recognize that encryption is such a big deal that your clients want to hear from you. So be the advocate for them. Bring it to their attention because they're expecting it.
Love that. And you're welcome to share your contact details. So how can listeners contact you?
So my cell number, you can always just call me on my phone. We can have a conversation, which is 208-921-5854. And then my email address, aliciar@titlepipe.com. So that's ALICIAR@titlepipe.com. So I'll forward that information to you so you've got that as well. But
sure.
I would just say, don't be a stranger. We're all in this together. And regardless of what state or city we're hearing this, we're all just people helping people. So understanding that there's lessons and value in learning from one another. And I thank you for creating a podcast to allow industry partners to come together and connect and share in a common theme of serving. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being on. Alicia Reinhard, everyone, real estate professional in Boise, Idaho, as well as head of business development for TitlePipe. So really excited to have you on and share just the possibilities with encryption and really everything that the industry in and of itself is shaping into, which is a faster, more secure, more trustworthy transaction. And through that, hopefully, even if commissions are compressed, we can increase deal volume and keep the best real estate professionals in the business by leveraging technology like this. So it's a really exciting time to be alive, and really appreciate all the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Thank you for listening. If you want to accomplish your real estate goals, then I highly suggest downloading my free Ultimate Real Estate Goal Setting Framework. The link is in the description of the show, and it will help you break down your annual income goal into the amount of phone calls, appointments, or open houses you need in order to achieve that goal. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.